Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. I'm here with Dacidbro. He's been playing a game called Catherine competitively for 7 years. And as a result of that, there are some interesting developments with that game that I think have been directly affected by playing this game so seriously for so long. So first I just want to say, hey, how's it going? Thanks for joining me.
Hey, good morning. Or afternoon, I guess, on Eastern
Yeah,
time.
yeah, CST or EST, whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought a good place to start would be, how did you get involved in competitive gaming in general, like the very origin of it?
Yeah, so that's kind of a strange and convoluted story. I guess it really started with Smash Brothers Melee, like it did for a lot of people. I was in junior high, that game came out, and I loved it. So I played it to death and then tried to get involved with, local, like semi competitive things with just my friend groups. And then that naturally led to the launch of Brawl. I tried to get more involved, and I ended up finding out that there were tournaments in Southern California through a friend of mine that invited me to the offline competitive team scene,
Mhm.
and that took me to some place. Well, I was a big, like really big fish in a really really small pond at that point. So I showed up and I just thought I was going to clean everyone out. And obviously, that wasn't the case. That's never the case for anyone as they get into competitive gaming. What I actually ran into is like a brick wall of players that were way better than me.
Mhm.
So that continued for a bit, and then I went to a tournament called Genesis. And at that tournament, I found a game called Blaze Blue from the same friend that invited me to Smash Brothers Brawl. I got invited to Blaze Blue Calamity Trigger, and that game really spoke to me in a way that I had never felt before. So I tried that game out. I played it as seriously as I could. I started actually going to events and kind of getting mauled because my character was rather poor in a game that wasn't well balanced.
Mhm.
So that was a very difficult game, but I didn't really feel the pain of it yet because I was just so excited. And then the next version of that game, my character became just crazy broken, absurdly top tier. So then I was like, okay, I should really make a go for this. Like, I should try to put my all into this and try to become a competitive player. And so I did, and I actually found great success. Started winning locals, placed at Evo, and etc. And after that, it was sort of just like, yeah, I have to stay in this. I have to stay with this. I
So,
want to keep playing competitive games as long as I can.
how old were you when that was all happening?
I was probably 19.
I see.
Let's see. 2009 was Calamity Triggers. That's 9 years ago. So that's 19. Yeah.
So, what were your plans for your future before, all of this tournament stuff started blowing up a little bit and you could start taking it a little more seriously?
That's really funny because before competitive gaming, I didn't really have much purpose in life and I kind of hated it. So what competitive gaming means to me is probably more than a lot of people. With competitive gaming, I was able to find a community that I actually believed in and cared about and was worth pouring my life into. It was like before competitive gaming, I sort of had a vague definition of like, I have to succeed, but I don't know what that means or why I care. I
Hmm.
was just kind of apathetic to everything. And through competitive gaming, I realized like I need to put my time in and I need to care for the people around me so that everyone can do these things that I care about and that I've found are interesting enough to live. So like competitive gaming is really important to me.
Huh. So, yeah, you were kind of purposeless until you started.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Were you playing
Yeah.
competitive games even as a kid, or did you just play regular video games and not like think too much about them, or were you always kind of drawn to maybe playing fighting games as a young kid and then but never seeing a future being able to play this at a professional level?
Yeah, it was like when I was a kid, I kind of just played everything. I played some I played Virtua Fighter on the Sega Saturn. I played Tekken on the PlayStation 1. I played Mortal Kombat, but like I never had any kind of meaningful competition to it because like my brother didn't care about competitive games. So while I enjoyed them, I didn't get any meaningful experience with them.
Hmm.
And I probably spent more time on RPGs and then in like early high school competitive shooters as well. I did get into that for a bit as well.
I see. On PC, like Counter Strike,
Hmm.
or
Yeah, it
okay,
was Counter Strike 1.6.
cool, cool. But again, even when you were playing Counter Strike, you never thought of it as anything other than just playing games and just doing it for fun, and never.
Yeah, exactly. It was just sort of an escape mechanism at that point, and sort of just like the like something I enjoyed, but I didn't understand it could be anything more than that at that point.
I see. And it wasn't until it probably wasn't even Smash, right? It was when you played Blaze
That's right.
Blue and that second re-release of that with your character kind of being rechanged that you started to be like, okay, this is something I can actually put all of my time into and it's something I care about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a very different atmosphere. Like once I got into the offline community in CT, I started to understand it, but I didn't understand how much you could get from it or how much it mattered, like how much the people mattered. Every individual player. Like it sort of dawned on me over time that like this whole community is all struggling to develop, and
Mhm.
everyone is working on their abilities in like complicated, vulnerable ways. And that was when I started to really see like how important fighting games are to me.
So, how did you get started? Because eventually you were a competitive player, but you started to move towards being able to commentate and kind of host some competitive events. Can
Yeah.
you talk about how that started?
Yeah, commentary is a funny one. The very first Blaze Blue event I ever went to, Mike Z looked at me and just was like, "You could probably do well on the mic," and I was like, "What?" And then I kind of went over there and like hopped on the mic and just like totally messed it all up. Honestly, like commentary is just a disaster at first. So I would say if anyone's trying to commentate, just like grab some videos, mute them, and talk over them. It's good practice, and then you don't have to have like your worst takes recorded in front of everyone. So what I did was the other way though. I was just on public commentary for years, doing really badly at it until, I kept watching it back and, saying like, wow, I could have done this a lot better, this a lot better, this a lot. It was actually a lot like competitive gaming too, because I do that with my competitive gaming footage. I'm just like, what am I doing in this clip? Why am I doing it like this? So then, I just improved over time organically. I was very lucky to have seats. At that point, the community was quite a bit smaller. So I was very fortunate to have a road to actually being a commentator. I'd say that's the biggest problem that people run into is actually just there's only two seats for any event, right? Or
Mhm.
like, maybe it rotates out a few times. But so then anyway, with all that, with commentary, and events, I do have like a pretty diverse skill set now between a degree that works with events
Mhm.
and commentary and being a player as well as like I do have sort of the total package regarding like helping people run events or hosting my own.
So, can you tell me
Um,
what that degree is? Because I don't think we said it
yeah,
on
so
time. Yeah.
I have a degree in interactive audio that
Okay.
also goes through a lot of live sound. And currently, by day, I work at Facebook. I do event operations there. So I spend a lot of time with events and the logistics of events and making sure that they all work. And mostly it's just about making sure you have all of the equipment as far ahead of time and that you know everything that people need for it. So, I mean, with events, it's sort of simple. You just make sure you have enough setups, and that you make sure that everyone knows where they should be at the right time.
So,
Those are the most important things.
yeah, you were at school. Were you still going to events while you were at school for this, or
Yeah, I
was
was going to events before I was at school as well.
yeah? So, I mean, the events kind of dictated your degree. It sounds like to some degree.
Yeah, because I switched my major after I got into competitive gaming.
Okay.
Uh, and then I realized I liked sound a lot, but I also liked sort of like the logistics of events as well. So those two together, as well as like sort of a practical piece of coding as well in the degree. Although I ended up hating coding, so don't look to me for that.
Yeah. So you were going to college, and you already had your degree planned out, and you were going to events, and you just commentated where you could really badly, and were just slowly getting better and better. Did you start to get like requests to come to events, or were you just already going to be at the event, and kind of always found a way to get yourself on the mic, or did it?
Yeah, at that point it was definitely very much just I'll be at this event and I would be happy to help. And that has been most of my commentary career. Really, it's like I was part of communities that needed it really badly. So I tried to get good at it, and I tried to make sure that I was there for it, and I tried to make sure that we would have, once I got better, I tried to make sure that I was involved with the more important moments, so that we would make sure that we'd have a good, clean presentation for the community.
Okay, cool. So then it wasn't typically, yeah, you were always just there and like, I would love to help. And typically they would just, of course, take the help because,
Yeah,
especially early on, these events weren't getting the kinds of numbers that they are getting nowadays.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, cool. So let's shift gears just a little bit. So that's your kind of general who you are and how you got into the scene. Let's talk about Catherine and how that scene kind of originated, because it seems like it's a kind of interesting origin story for the competitive scene of Catherine.
Yeah, so a lot of pretty much all of the Catherine origin began with NorCal Install and Chun basically saying like, "Hey guys, we should run a joke side tournament for Catherine," and like everyone thought that was just a brilliant idea because it's got this competitive mode tucked in. It's like no one had ever played it, but we might as well. Like we love gimmick games. So me and Koopa, Sean Huang, we were on Finest KO and we were over at his streaming house, and like I kind of like rib him and I'm like, hey, we should get like a leg up on the competition for Catherine tomorrow, like we should get a head start. So we open up the competitive mode and we start playing it, and then we kind of like black out and wake up 7 hours later and we're like, wait, this game is like really good. It's like we just like actually lost 7 hours like playing this game. And it was wild. Like as we were playing it, the more we realized like it follows fighting game logic. It actually follows like knockdowns and like reversals, and like you have to fight each other more than you have to climb. It was like just bizarre. So we took it to the tournament the next day, and like we showed everyone that we knew, like here's actually the beginnings of a meta for this game. So everyone kind of knew how to play it by the time we got around to actually streaming it. And we put it on Twitch, and it had like 5,000 viewers on like early Twitch, like 2012 Twitch,
Mhm.
which was like a crazy phenomena at that point. And it was really blowing up that day because it's just crazy. Like when that game's being played and everyone kind of knows what they're doing, like the things that happen are just really wild. So that gave it its first sort of boost, and then we kept taking it to events for about a year and a half after that. But we didn't really get it off the ground until 2015 when Atlas was willing to host us at their booth at Evo. That was like just a crazy opportunity. So we took it there and we hosted it, and one of the big features of this event was that Australia came out, and at that point Australia had a scene that they insisted was like unbeatable, which was sort of a fascinating phenomenon of our community. But
Uh-huh.
it turns out they were quite serious about it. Australia is actually very good at Catherine, and they came over and we all played. I ended up taking that one down, but Australia got second and third. But that was like a major event for us. We had it on Atlas's official YouTube. It was streamed. Everyone watched it. So that was where we started to actually get our roots in Evo. So then we kept it going the next year, 2016. That was also when we started to involve the Melee community because Toph got involved. That was like a crazy opportunity for us as well.
Mhm.
2017, we sort of just continued with the momentum we had. And then 2018 has been exciting because we've had the promise of full body. So that sort of brings us to today, where this PS4 version and the developers' support and explicit mention of our community has been so exciting.
Yeah, that's the really interesting part, is that it sounds like they have seen this competitive scene that came kind of out of nowhere and then blew up a little bit. And you said that Atlas officially supported a tournament, and now they're more than just officially supporting a tournament. They're actually taking the elements from this competitive scene and incorporating them into this re-release. And I think I'm not sure if this was officially said, but it seemed like the online multiplayer component of it is as a direct result of all of this competitive presence.
They did actually explicitly say that exact sentence. They said that because of the overseas interest in the competitive mode, they want to put a net play,
Oh my god. How do
which
you
is wild. It's
Yeah.
absolutely wild.
Yeah, how has the Catherine scene in general kind of reacted to I assume really well, but like, is there anything surprising that you've seen in the Catherine competitive scene as a result of this?
Yeah, I mean everyone's shocked. I mean no one knows how to process it at all. It's like it's been the most unexpected thing that I have maybe ever experienced regarding competitive gaming and developers. Like it's unheard of. I have never heard of it. I've never heard of any developer ever saying, "Well, just because of the competitive scene, we're going to do X." Like, I've never heard of that. I've absolutely never heard of that. I've heard a
Well,
lot of gratitude. I've heard a lot of thanks. I've heard a lot of support, but I've never heard of the competitive community is why we're doing this.
Well, Catherine's also just really interesting because, fighting games, they typically, kind of, at least their origins, they blew up right away in a competitive sense and like they kind of
Yeah,
jumped on it right away. This was a slow burn that
that was
blew
exactly
up
what I was
in,
going to call it. Yeah.
yeah, out of nowhere. That's like just fascinating. I can't, man, Catherine is such an interesting, is such an interesting story. Here's a question.
Although,
Yeah, go ahead.
so I do want to compare it to one other game that has had a similar story though, and that's competitive Melee. I think that's
Mm,
why Melee players can actually understand our community and the fact that this is an old game, but that doesn't mean it's obsolete or irrelevant. Because if the mechanics of a game are good and you have anyone to play with, you should still play that game. Like with competitive Smash, they had to come to terms with that after Brawl release, and it was honestly very disappointing for most players.
mhm.
Magical Drop players have had to have that same experience when Magical Drop 3 was obviously the best version, even though they kept releasing 4 and 5. It's like sort of a complicated thing, but at the end of the day, if you know you have a more competitive version of the game you love, you should play it. And if it exists, you should support it. So with Catherine, like a Melee player looking at Catherine, they just say, yeah, that's a good game. Like, if they believe in it, they just say that's a good game. It doesn't matter when it was launched. Melee in 2013 had to, have their whole spirit bomb to get Melee back in Evo, and that resurrected the scene. It wasn't thriving until 2013 when the people put their support back into Melee.
That's a really interesting comparison. So, do you think that here's a question. Do you think that the reason people don't take it seriously is a result of it the kind of options in the game not coming off as particularly like they took special care in the versus multiplayer? It's almost like if there's not intent to take it seriously, people won't attempt to not take it seriously. Because I could see the same kind of thing said for items on or something in Smash Brothers.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
I do think there's a bit of that. The biggest problem that Catherine honestly has is that people haven't watched the footage. So that's becoming less of a problem every year,
Hmm.
and especially this latest year, people seem to actually be watching the footage and getting excited about it. But the biggest problem that we always had is that people just actually wouldn't watch the game. I've had so many encounters where I would show someone Catherine once, and the conversation would change from like, yeah, it's cool, I'm glad you're supporting that game, to like, when can I get a copy of it, or like, when will it be playable, like, when will it be on PS4? And it's like, because the game is crazy, the game is fun, the game is interesting, but you have to actually look at it beyond, this is a dating sim that has a competitive mode that you have to unlock and doesn't have net play like that, and it's on PS3. It's like the things that were stacked against us so far have just been like extremely like unspeakably problematic to the game's growth. So this PS4 version that will have net play be unlocked by default and sort of has this whole voice saying like, yes, we are taking the competitive mode seriously. It helps more than anyone could know.
So, if someone is in a similar position, let's say they have a favorite PSN download that you can't even get anymore, it's off the PSN store, and it has these things that you say Catherine has. You can see all of the fighting game elements of like you have to interact with your opponent in a specific way in order to achieve like victory over them. How would you say they start to get people to take it seriously? Because it seems like Catherine had like you said, a really big uphill battle. So
Hmm.
there are a lot of other games that I think people like, and maybe they are involved in their local like competitive scene, but they just feel like no one's ever going to take it seriously, so they don't bother. Do you have any kind of recommendations for those people? Other than, I mean, the obvious thing would be to bring it to the competitive scene, but it seems like it might
Yeah.
take a little bit more than that.
Yeah, there's a few lessons, surely. One of the most important is you really have to involve it with another scene. Like, if we didn't have the foot traffic of fighting game events, there's absolutely no way we ever would have got started. If we didn't ever try the game, there's no way we would have gotten started. So that there's like another odd part of it where none of us even knew this existed until we accidentally tried it as just a dumb gimmick. So like, be experimentative, try things, and try other people's games, and that will cross pollinate frequently. It's like if everyone has one game that they like a lot, and then everyone brings those games together as like a game potluck, and everyone tries each other's games, it's more likely at least one of them will find some success. Another thing to say about that is that where was I going with that? I definitely had more to say about that. Success. Yeah. So I've totally lost my train of thought.
That's
That's
okay.
fascinating.
I mean, so would you highly encourage then, like local fighting game scenes, to at least have a side tournament of either like a mystery or a variety of many games that kind of no one has played before, and it's expected that no one has played them before, to kind of facilitate that kind of new emergence of games that would otherwise just be left in the dust?
Yeah, man, I think that's a great idea. You have a bunch of people that are passionate about their games, and that passion will certainly invoke people to actually try their other people's games that they also care about. That's just sort of natural. So I would definitely recommend exactly that.
Cool. So let's talk about get back on track to exactly Catherine again. So
Sure.
Catherine's competitive scene has kind of pushed for people to find new ways to play Catherine, because as you said, it's kind of, you have to unlock it. It's on an older console now. It's a little more difficult to get into, and there's been a small PC community that's kind of remaking the game. Have you taken notice of that at all?
Yeah, I've noticed it. I haven't been too involved with it, but
Mhm.
yeah, I think the biggest thing that they want to do is enable level editing, which I think is interesting. I honestly try not to bring much attention to it because I just the legality is always gray.
Mhm.
But I like what they're doing. I think it's cool.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess we haven't really talked about it, but what other than, do you know anything about Full Body other than the bringing ranked multiplayer unlocked from the start? Do you know almost anything else about the game? Because they said that they're going to take mechanics and look into them based on
Yeah.
this competitive scene.
Yeah, so one thing I can say for sure that has already been talked about and experienced by some players is the pin state has been changed. Actually, this does bring me back to something I was going to say.
Okay,
Okay, so
go
one
ahead.
one of the things I was going to say is if your game about this is about other games and
Hmm.
about spreading them is if your game has problems, do your best to fix them yourself. So that could mean a lot of different things. With Catherine, there was one of the worst mechanics of any game I've ever experienced, which is the pin state. So PlayStation 3 Catherine, if you got pinned, you would just be stuck there until the floor drops out at the end. And there was a kill setup that would just say, I stand on you until the floor is about to drop out. I use a 9 head bob setup and then I walk up.
Hmm.
So that's a guaranteed kill state. And it shows up very commonly whenever the game can't drop you down when you get hit and towards the camera.
Hmm.
So I, in a stroke of true genius, invented the pin selfie, which has become one of our most charming marketing things as a community, and it's just been like heartwarming and wholesome. And so we took the worst thing in our game and created like the best, most fun gimmick out of it, and that has really patched up that like terrible, terrible spot in the game.
So
Um,
yeah, can you explain that for people who don't know what that selfie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the pin selfie is when you're playing a match and you get someone pinned and you realize you have like 30 seconds to a minute to stand on them.
Hmm.
So you take out your phone, you take a picture with your opponent, you put it on Twitter, and then finish the match. So during the match, you do all of this. And that has become a tradition that the community's really, really gotten behind. And we have just like the hashtag pin underscore selfie hashtag like has just like all of our best in tournament in top 8 from stage like everyone in the crowd gets into it. It's like it's so great. So that's like I think the most extreme example, but also like a good example of like even the worst stuff might have a very creative solution. um
That's amazing.
Obviously games like Melee or Towerfall kind of get lucky that the developers actually gave them choices for things like that.
Hmm.
But even if your game has something really awful in it, it's possible there's something you could do about it. Even if it's just community agreed, don't do something.
Hmm.
That is better than letting the game be bad, right? It's like if there's something that's truly unacceptable competitively, you have to find a way around it, or the game will flounder. So I'd recommend. I mean, it doesn't have to be as extreme as like public Twitter selfies during the match, but a lot of games could use like a few articulate bans. If
Yeah.
one character, like Pet Shop in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure arcade mode, like I think people generally agree that character shouldn't be played, and like things like that are okay. You should make those decisions. You should feel confident to make those decisions whenever you realize that some part of the game is ruining the rest of it.
Why do you think
Anyway,
that pin mechanic didn't get that ban? I mean, as a result of your kind of like your.
So it's really complicated with the pin one. It's like Catherine. Honestly, there's no good way to ban that. You can accidentally do that. So what we could have done is we could have said if you hit someone and you pin them, you just can't interact with them. You just have to walk away. But that's sort of a weird ruling, right? It's like it actually would have really hampered the natural competitive flow of the game.
It's
So I
not
felt
as-
like that was unacceptable.
Yeah, it's not as simple as don't pick Akuma. It's kind
Exactly,
of got,
exactly.
a weird vague line. Yeah.
And it's not as simple as don't do an infinite either,
Right.
because there are frequently cases where you can pin someone, and in most of those cases, the reward is actually very logical, and you could have thought about it. And so we just decided, like, I mean, it's okay that pin state exists, and we'll call that a kill because it kind of has to be. Although that brings me to my next point. In full body, they have changed the pin state. When you're on the ground in Catherine full body, you can grab the opponent and put them into pin state. So there's sort of like a revolving door of like, if you stand on someone who's pinned, you yourself can become pinned.
I see. Okay.
So they have addressed one of the worst things about the game in the PS4 version, and that's very exciting. It does probably kill our pin selfies, and I'm okay with that because that was just to patch up the worst thing in the game, right? Like I'm thrilled that they're killing that.
There's a pin selfie happening right now in the footage for people watching.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah. But yeah, it is good that because I mean, with net play, it would be quite difficult to drive over to your opponent's house and take the picture before your pin state's done. So it is good that that's kind of we're stepping away from that to make the game. Do you have a lot of confidence that with this re-release that Catherine will have like the biggest competitive scene it's ever had, even at its like highest moments ever?
Yeah, without a doubt. There's no way it couldn't. Like the interest that we're seeing in Japan is unreal. Where that's like their main marketing is happening. There was a video from Tokido saying he was going to challenge the community. It's it's hard for me to even express in English in America like how big this looks in Japan right now. So like I don't know, but it's hard for me to imagine we wouldn't have double or triple or quadruple the numbers. Which would be 32, right? 16 to 32 right now. Like I would expect 64 to 128.
Was there a big competitive scene in Japan for Catherine at any point?
No, it totally missed Japan so far because all of what we were doing so far was like all America. But Mekasue brought it to Evo Japan with Atlas. So the last Evo Japan, they had a tournament, and there was a lot of interest from people that we'd never seen before. It's like just completely new people.
Yeah, and that was before the announcement, right?
That's right. Yeah,
cool. So yeah, it's been naturally kind of growing then with like Japan, showing up, and then this announcement. It just seems like there's no way that this can't get, Catherine can finally get kind of the as many people as maybe it deserves.
Yeah, I think so. And it's exciting because this is a genre that doesn't exist without Catherine. It's like this is like truly. This is its own thing. There's fighting games, which are, one-on-one, you beat your opponent up, they die. There's puzzle games, which are like you solve the puzzle better. Mm-hmm. There are puzzle games where you interact with your opponent, but they're not fighting games. That's like Puyo Puyo, Tetris, and there's like shmups where you do the same thing, but there's nothing where you're actually sort of platform fighting people on a puzzle. Catherine is truly its own genre right now. And that is... It's just exciting to see that people are finally understanding what's so interesting about this game and that they're giving it a shot. So I'm just excited about that.
Do you think that Catherine being popular could lead to more games taking in the FGC environment kind of stepping into weird territory that's not exactly, following the norms, like you said? Like Catherine's in a really strange, interesting place in terms of there's nothing else quite like it. do you think we'll see more of that and people will be able to take it serious? Like, Catherine can be used as a story of like, we should take this game
Hmm.
seriously. Look what happened to Catherine. Do you see that
Yeah,
happening?
yeah, that's already happened. That's already happened for games that are even already existent. Like people were talking to me about like, how do I revive JoJo's? How do I, make sure that like Skullgirls exists in my local community? It's like how do I all these games that people like that they just want to bring back. Like a lot of people talk to me about it because I had that sort of strange, weird path with Catherine. It's just like this kind of came from dust, right? It's just like there was nothing, and then we just supported the hell out of it for years, and it has become something. So that's already happened, and I'm hoping that developers who are making new games also take note. It's like your game doesn't have to be just like straight and narrow competitive fighting game. Like there's games like Lethal League that already exist like that. There's games like
Mhm.
Towerfall.
Mhm.
Like there's a lot of awesome games that really haven't seen the competitive life that I would hope for them. And I honestly think it's just because a lot of people haven't tried them. Like these are awesome games. Like I think Towerfall with the right settings is shockingly competitive.
Mhm.
Lethal League 2 looks really promising. I'm just hoping that all these games get noticed and get played and get supported.
Yeah, and it seems like with Catherine, I mean, this is like such a great underdog story that I think it could lead to all kinds of amazing things like that. Like games that just didn't get a chance might be able to get a chance now. Not even new games, just like games that have been
Hmm.
around and just no one would take them seriously. It's really nice to see that Catherine is inspiring people who
Yeah,
don't
and
even play
it,
Catherine.
it's sort of this thing where there's almost always more than enough people to support a game. It's just they all say the game's dead, so I can't play it. Instead of finding the people that would play it, and it's this thing where I mean, if a game has net play, it's kind of effortless to support it as long as you're in contact with those people. But frequently, people just sort of resign themselves to the fact that something doesn't have a community and they don't pursue it. And I think that's the mistake that people generally make. They just sort of accept what's popular and play whatever other people are playing. And it doesn't have to be like that. And it's almost certain that there's something you would like more if you weren't. Not to say that the popular games aren't good. Dragon Ball
Mhm.
Fighters is actually one of my most favorite games of all time, and that just happens to be popular right now. So that feels great.
Mhm.
But you can start these communities like Catherine did and actually just find people that are willing to give it a shot and willing to try to support it. And I think a lot of times you'll find the people that are very similar to you, and you'll find communities that really matter to you.
Yeah. Do you think there's any legitimacy to like the criticism that if everyone's playing all kinds of different games, there will be no there will be no like there won't be a
Like it'll
particular.
splinter people too much.
Yes, exactly.
No, I think that's nonsense.
Hmm.
I think there's what you'll actually end up seeing is the entire community will grow. Because instead of people feeling like, oh, well, my game's not popular right now, so I shouldn't exist in the community,
Hmm.
instead of that, you'll see people being like, I need to support all of these games that I like, or I need to at least support my games and then watch other games and then participate in the event. And then, like maybe I'll do dumb money matches for some other game. And like you'll actually just see more people in the community. And I think that's what we've seen in 2018 with all of these fantastic breakout titles like Cross Tag and Dragon Ball. Like the cross pollination is absolutely massive right now, and
Hmm.
I think it's very obvious that that's just been good for numbers.
So do you think that events are going to be able to have enough? So let's say that a lot of new games kind of show up as a result of this. Do you think that there's going to be problems with events not having basically the kind of resources to be able to give all of those games the
Hmm.
kind of attention that some people might want?
Yeah, I think you have to prove it. Like any new event, any TO is going to say like, I don't even know if these people exist. Do you? And like, you're probably going to have to say no, and then you're probably going to have to say, well, I'll hold a side event. Like,
Mhm.
could anyone retweet it? Like, could you at least spread it, and then we could see? It might like maybe have a sign for it, say like, get the foot traffic. The biggest thing is to make sure as many people you could possibly know it exists, and then see if they're there, and then just do your best with whatever you end up with. Like Catherine had a lot of 4-man tournaments a long
Mhm.
time ago. Like
Mhm.
that's not really like heartening, but it was real at the time that there weren't that many people. But it grew, and every individual person was absolutely critical to where we are now. Like literally every single person that ended up playing Catherine for more than one event was critical, even if they don't now. So just like I guess one of the lessons for a community this small is you absolutely don't have time or you cannot be bad to anyone. Like you can't not get along with
Hmm.
anyone in that community. It's extremely critical that you treat everyone well and that you be extremely respectful, like as good to people as you possibly can be, because you can't afford it. You can't afford to have even one dispute. It's like you have to be extremely careful with everyone, and it's honestly just a great community lesson. Just like try to be good to people. I didn't really understand how important interpersonal communication and like the relationships we were forming were when I was starting competitive games. I was kind of a shitty kid, and over my time at competitive gaming, I have learned that it is utterly critical to treat everyone well, and I think that's like one of the most important things you could aspire to.
Have you seen communities like having potential basically fall apart as a result of basically bad behavior and keeping people out?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a tale as old as time. I think that's one of the most common ways. Like it's complicated because people don't get along for a lot of different reasons, and
Hmm.
like what I would generally encourage is to try to just leave all of that out of the community and try to just understand what each other needs and do your best to support them and try to be good to each other.
Especially in the origins of a new competitive scene. If you want it to survive at all, that seems especially important. You're just not going to be
Yeah,
able to.
if there's ever a bad conflict in a small community, it's over. That community's done. Like it is that severe. Like you have to avoid it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, it's good that the natural outcome is be good, and it tends to be that the game will also succeed as a result. It seems
Yeah, right.
uh, very very nice that it works out that way.
Hmm.
So we've talked about full body and
Oh, but I wasn't done with the items. There's
oh.
there's at least there's at least a few more other things they're doing. I think they're adding two different items that you can pick up in full body.
Hmm.
One of which I believe is the like wide create a block. I have no idea what that's going to mean for the game.
Uh-huh.
Um, but the one that I do know is going to be crazy is the invisibility potion, which, as far as I know, when you pick it up and use it, it makes both players invisible.
Huh.
So this one was scary to people for the first moment that they figured it out. But as soon as I heard it, I was just like really, really interested because this to me says like, okay, if you could make just yourself invisible, that's like espionage, right? Like you can sneak in and do something.
Hmm.
But if you can make your opponent invisible, and if they might not even know where they are,
Hmm.
and they weren't aware that you were about to activate it, but you have complete control of the fact that like they might not have a good grasp on what's going on, like you will. And even
Huh.
if they do, as they figure out what's going on with them, they have definitely lost where you are. So, like, I'm really interested in this item because of the implications of like it's just not only playing clean and tight now. Like if this item is strong, if this item actually makes both players actually invisible, this
Hmm.
game's going to be crazy. And you're going to have sort of a chess player that's blindfolded like level of understanding of the board
Uh-huh.
and like where you are and where they are, but like in real time, right? It's like it's so fast and it's so dangerous when you even add just a little bit of disruption to a game like this.
That's true. Do you know if they're
So
changing any of the original items?
I think they're leaving those intact. One of the biggest things that we don't know, I think, is the percentages of items spawn. This is one of the most interesting and most cryptic things about Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Even though it was not intended to be taken seriously and competitive, there was someone on the team that coded an extremely articulate way that items spawn in a competitive mode. And as you increase the distance between you and your opponent, the item spawn increases percentage wise, and which items can spawn changes. So you don't get the X factor until you're a bit behind on most stages.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the percentage raises dramatically as you get further and further and further behind. And this natural rubber banding lends itself well to the sort of competitive flow of it where okay, if you're too far ahead, your opponent gets back into it. It's like that sort of thing. So I don't know what they're doing with that, especially with the new items. I don't have any idea what percentages the items will spawn at. It might be different on every stage. It already was, but they might change the values on every stage. So I just don't know. I that could change everything very dramatically.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that like some developer took a lot of time and like this thing that seemed like throwaway to other developers, someone put something like really like nice in there for the competitive mode. That sounds like what people argue happened in Melee as well.
Hmm.
Do
Yeah.
you think that there was someone on the Catherine team, like the person who coded that was like, I this is so unique and interesting. I actually care about this and I want to make this the best it can possibly be.
Yeah, it is definitely possible. When I look at the coding involved with the percentage to spawn items, I do feel a little religious. It's like I do feel like like there might be intelligent design there. Like that might be highly intentional, and it might be that someone actually understood what this could be ahead of time. And I don't know, but like it is absolutely necessary that those values existed for Catherine to be competitive right now. So whoever you are, thank you. You did it.
Yeah. So okay. So you mentioned the items. Anything else you know about Full Body?
No, I think that's about what I've got. I think there's new stages, and I think they're rebalancing some of the stages.
Hmm.
But I don't know what that means yet. So I'll have to find out.
Yeah, and it comes out in when did it comes out?
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day, right? So people will be able to play it relatively soon.
Yeah, it's just a few
Yeah.
months.
Whew, that's wow. I just as someone who like always appreciated Catherine and kind of kept an eye on the scene but never really touched it. This seems like this feels very justified. It feels
Yeah.
like I think you know I think a lot of people have probably also done the same thing and just never jumped into it. And now I think this is their chance, right? This is the
Yeah, I
chance to
agree.
be like, so even people who are interested in Catherine, there's the natural thing with competitive games of it drives a lot of people away of, uh, you know, the scene is already come and gone. I can't learn quick
Hmm.
enough to get there, which is kind of
Yeah.
dubious logic in the first place. But I mean, nonetheless, a lot of people think that and don't play. So this is kind of a resurgence for those people because Catherine Catherine was a pretty popular game even in its non-competitive scene, from what I remember.
Yeah, it's true.
So yeah, this will be really exciting, and I'm glad that you played a direct part, possibly in. Have you heard anything about would this remake even happen without the competitive scene, or is that kind of just speculation?
I haven't heard anything about
Okay,
that.
yeah,
I don't know. I really don't know.
yeah, that would be hard to prove unless they explicitly said so, but I don't think so.
Hmm.
It probably just would not have network. It's entirely
Yeah,
possible they might
exactly.
have taken it out entirely without the scene. They just said, "Well, this was a throwaway thing that no one cared about," and then
Yeah, or
let's
port
go.
it directly as it was, which is like
Or
you need a save file to unlock it. No net play. Like
yeah,
it could just be exactly what it was before, and I think that's what you expect.
right, right. Okay, well, cool. I mean, is there anything else we want to? I think we kind of went over everything. uh,
Yeah, that felt pretty comprehensive.
Yeah. So, do you have anything obviously we talked about early on that do commentary and, sometimes host events and competitive things other than Catherine, obviously a lot. You go to all kinds of events. So, is there anything happening recently that you'd like to kind of plug and let people know is happening?
Yeah, I think an obvious first plug for a stream talking about Catherine tournaments is to plug Climb Cancel. That's
Mhm.
gonna be over on the East Coast. I'm sure we can put the at somewhere.
Yeah.
I can just type in the chat real quick at Climb Cancel. If you put that over to Twitter, you'll find everything about the event.
Cool.
That is hosted by Shaz and Jordy. It's like that's a lot of the best Catherine players are over there, and you'll see a lot about that over there.
Interesting.
What else for current events? If you guys want to just like see me at a local event, maybe play Dragon Ball or anything like that, and you happen to be in NorCal, I go to ESA Oakland a lot. That is at ESA Oakland, and I'm there every Wednesday. So that is another place that you can come chat and talk to me. Like, we can do all this kind of stuff offline. And like, I like talking when it's not a stream or not like, an official thing too. So and you can also just say hi to me over on Twitter. I'm always on Twitter. It's just at Dacidbro. And I constantly answer messages about absolutely everything. So those are probably like the easiest things to talk about.
Gotcha. And actually, since you mentioned it, have you seen the East Coast scene, fighting game scene, has tended like I tend to find since I was on the East Coast, like that scene is a lot more close knit because it just doesn't seem like all of the big things are happening somewhere like over more towards the West Coast. Do you think that Catherine? Did you notice that Catherine players tended to like? Did you see a large majority of them coming from the East Coast?
Yeah, so there's a phenomena that just certainly started with Shaz and Jordy.
Mm-hmm.
They were Maryland's finest, and they still are. And it's just that you find one person, you just play the game often with them, and take it really seriously. You can get real good. Shaz just showed up out of nowhere 2 years ago at CEO Taku, and I just saw a ton of potential in him. And like a tournament or two later, he was like competing for second, and then like after that he just became impossible to beat. Shaz has won like every tournament for the last year, maybe a little more than that, and it was crazy. It was just like like I went from winning every tournament for 3 years to like I can't touch a guy, like I can't touch a Catherine player. It was just like just bizarre. But that's the testament to like when people play hard and constantly, you can create a scene out of nowhere. Maryland doesn't. Maryland, like how? When's the last time you heard of like Maryland as like the strongest scene for something? Like it's crazy. They absolutely just put Maryland on the map because they cared about it, and they have become absolutely dominant. So that's like the story of Maryland. Then they added like Silent Black Cat as well. So there's been a few pockets. There's been Florida has been another one. That's with like Sketches and Sketches Boys. There's been Texas, which is like Linus and Ghoul. NorCal used to have me, Mike, and Toph, although lately it's been kind of just me. I'm hoping that changes with Full Body because I could really use some practice. But even if I did need some practice, I'll just go online now.
Yeah. How seriously are you going to take this competitively when it comes out? Because I mean, go ahead.
I don't want to lose to anyone in Full Body. I'm really tired of it. So I'm going to be heading back for number one. The biggest thing that's got me right now is I don't have local competition. No one wants to play with me right now. But it will change with online, mandatorily, because there's people that want to play me. So hit me up on NetPlay. I'm definitely happy to play once Full Body drops.
Yeah. This game especially, I think, will probably have really good netcode. It just seems like the kind of inputs this game has compared to something like a fighting game, I think they could get away with, even if they kind of botch the netcode to some degree, I think that they could still play pretty well.
Yeah, there's a phenomena surely where just like interacting with the important things, even if it's a little bit off, will be very, very, very important. And just comparing notes, it's like the openings in this game are so big. It's like if you haven't interacted with an opening, or if you haven't interacted with another person's tendencies, you are so much more alien to like the reward of that circumstance. So yeah, even if the net play is not perfect, it will still be worth a lot, especially just because a lot of people won't play the game offline. It's like just the ability to play it, even if it's imperfect, is so much to someone that's living in like a place and in a circumstance where they can't travel. It's like it's hard to understate how important the net play is.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, thanks a lot for joining us. I think that we basically went over everything we could about this, and I just find it incredibly inspiring that if you take a game seriously, and you do, and then you just kind of convince people on the way that it's also should be taken a little more seriously, you can kind of influence the whole future of the game, especially with Catherine. It's just with the re-release just blows my mind that all this is happening. So yeah, thanks for giving us an inspiring story. I know for you watching me specifically, the last two have been kind of downers, and I'm really glad that we have something inspiring to kind of show that video games and caring about video games, not even just as a developer but just caring about them, can lead to incredible results. You just need to basically believe that it's going to happen and keep trying to make it work. And if it doesn't work out, at least something you'll get something out of it regardless. That was the last two talks have been kind of showing that they got something out of it, even if it didn't work out the way they wanted. In this case, it did work out. Like, I don't even think, did you expect Catherine to ever get released ever again before this whole event happened?
I mean, you could just go down the list. I didn't expect Catherine to have meaningful tournaments. I
Uh-huh.
didn't expect Catherine to get remade. I didn't expect the developers to take it seriously. I didn't expect to have net plays. Like I didn't expect to have a whole community of like close friends as a result of what I was doing with Catherine. It's just like the whole thing is truly an anomaly, but I think in a way that proves that it's possible for other communities. And that I think that's like the coolest torch that we get out of this community. It's like, yes, like you definitely can convince other people to play your game, and if they like it the same way that you do, that's all you need.
And that's kind of you had a similar experience with the fighting game scene in general when you first entered, of not like knowing what you were going to do, and then you saw
Yeah.
the scene and people were going to take it seriously, and you saw that it needed help, and you saw a purpose there.
Yeah,
And
that's absolutely
yeah,
right.
so for the same, like Catherine is just kind of a microcosm of the larger scale thing about the fighting games, like taking competitive games seriously, not just fighting games, but any
Yeah,
games
that's right.
seriously.
That's right.
Yeah. So yeah, this has been super great. Thanks for coming on, and thanks everyone for joining me. If you have any kind of interesting stories, good or bad, about caring about fighting game or video games in general, and or developing video games, please at me on Twitter, CS does CS, and you can private message me and just tell me your story, and maybe we can talk about it, because this has been really good so far, and I'm really glad I had this discussion. Thanks a lot. Bye.